All right, welcome to the February 20th Shelburne Development Review meeting in Shelburne, Vermont. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to open up with public comment from anyone in the vast audience as well. All right, if not, any comments from the board? I believe you've mentioned something about the agenda.
I would just like to comment on the agenda. Item number 8, the wording there is saying substantially modify previous conditions of approval. I think that staff should refrain from adding adjectives, adverbs, and kind of comment that could be construed as prejudgment or pre-conclusion. It ought to be worded more like on number 10 where it just says to modify.
I can't speak to that one, but I'll ask the vice chair to speak to that. If there's anything.
Ravi, if he has any particular reason for stating it that way first.
Staff felt that substantially is to underscore the scope of modification and the amount of modification that the applicant is pursuing. If this can be construed as biased, we can remove it for any future agendas in order to prevent any bias on our part. We do review all applications objectively and holistically without any predetermined thoughts before receiving any applications.
I guess my only comment, Ravi, and I'm not saying this is someone who's participating in this particular case because I'm not, it could be taken to be a suggestion or a conclusion as to the standard of review for any modifications by the use of the word. So maybe a more neutral word would avoid any misunderstanding as an invocation of the Stowe doctrine.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that. I think as a general policy, I don't think it would hurt to keep the adjectives off the agenda.
Okay. Duly noted. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
We should put 6 and 8 together.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's make a motion to move item 8 after item 6. Anyone second that?
I'll second.
Well, it does lower on that page that you're only seeing the top of.
All right, so we have a second on that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's move down. All right, any recusals from the board?
I will continue my recusals from the items originally numbered 6 and 8.
Likewise for myself. Any others? No. Okay. Continuing to move forward, let's look at the approval of the minutes from February 6th.
I have a slight change that I'm going to offer as a suggestion. On page 2, the back side of page 1, number 4, third bullet, it says that I said I am a client of Clint West. I think the exchange was more along the lines of I said I'm a client of CEA, but don't feel it'll impact my ability to make a decision on the Clint West application.
That's how I recall it.
Okay, oh, we've got Suzanne, huh? Marianne, excuse me.
But
All right. Robbie, were you able to capture that?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I've got it marked up. I can show you afterwards.
All right. Any other comments on?
On SUB 1802, I asked some fairly pointed questions of the applicant's engineer, and I asked him if he believed in his professional opinion that certain outcomes can be reasonably guaranteed, and I prefer that Marianne went back and just reviewed the tape and included in a little more detail my questions and the response by the applicant's engineer. I think it's important to have those statements in the record.
That was with reference to the 25-year storm, as I recall.
Correct.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I have nothing else.
All right, in that case, would you like Marianne to look at proposed modifications, then bring it back for approval?
Yes, I didn't
Okay.
get a chance to watch the tape and
Okay.
pluck out the exact language.
So let's play it that way, okay? So we're almost approving the minutes this week, but we'll catch it the next session, okay? All right, anything else from anyone? Okay, thank you. Mr. Precourt, you're up. I'd like to, application DR 19-01, application by Precourt Investment for design review for changes to some previously approved window and door locations and replacement of a metal roof with a standing seam roof. Property is located at 80 Shelburne Shopping Park. It's located in the Village Overlay District, the Village Design Review Overlay District, the Village Core Overlay District, and the Stormwater Overlay District. As is customary, let's have staff kick us off and tell us what you can about this, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant.
So, the applicant is proposing a slight change to a previously modified design review application. The approval was for windows and door locations and to replace an existing metal roof. The Historic Preservation and Design Review Commission heard this application on February 14th and recommended it to the DRB as is. And at this point, I will defer to the applicant.
Very good. Mr. Precourt. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Okay.
My name is Brian Precourt. As Ravi said, we came to the board in 2017, end of 2017, I think, for approval to redo the windows and doors on the old shed building. We've been renovating it for a little bit, and we wanted to adjust the doors again, and leaving that burnt orange, half corrugated, half standing seam roof on it didn't seem right, so we're replacing that also. So I have elevations up there if you want me to go over them. There isn't much change to them.
Yeah, just to get everyone up to speed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Marianne. Yes. From the previous approved plan, no changes on the north side. On the south side, we added a separate door. Before, you had to walk through the smoking area and drinking area to get to the apartments upstairs, so now there's a separate door on the side. 2 windows that were on the west side were actually moved to the front of the building, or the parking side of the building, parking lot side of the building. It's still sort of in flux as to what's going on in the inside, on the first floor anyway.
Okay.
We're looking at a couple of uses, so, but those changes we wanted to make. So the same windows that were spec'd before, it was just basically shifting the location around. The roof itself, one of the planes has changed. This section in the front here actually didn't have any foundation underneath it when we started to renovate, so when we changed it, there used to be a lower shed roof section on it. We just made it all the same plane now. So those are pretty much the only changes.
All right.
If anyone has any questions.
Questions, comments from the board? None? Questions, comments from the public?
I think he's doing a fantastic job out there. It looks great.
Looks great every time I go to the hardware store.
Enormous improvement in that corner of the lot. Thank you. Well done.
Excellent. All right. Do we have any motions, Ravi?
At the bottom of the staff
Yeah,
report.
I'll make a motion to grant design review approval to Precourt Investment Company LLC for the changes to the window and door locations and the new standing seam roof at 80 Shelburne Shopping Park, as submitted on the elevations dated 2/3/19, with the one condition that a new zoning permit depicting the revised plan shall be obtained.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. The ayes carry it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's now time for me to jump out, and you got the bridge.
Okay. Good. So this is going to take us to two applications. The first item we'll deal with is SUB 1302R4, which is a continuation of an application by CEA on behalf of Shelburne Green for sketch plan review for a two-lot subdivision. This property is at 120 Graham Way in Sage Court, located in the Commerce and Industry South District and the Stormwater Overlay District. Ravi, could you just give us a quick summary for everyone's benefit on where we're at with this, since it's a continuation?
Sure. So this application was originally slated for, I believe, January 16th, 2019 of the DRB meeting. This is a two-lot subdivision. From our understanding, it's simply to draw a line dividing Phase 1 of the PUD from Phase 2. Phase 2 is known as Shelburne Green South. This proposal, in effect, would create a 6.3 acre lot and a 14.4 acre lot. With this application, with the line drawn in, staff does have some suggestions that the DRB and the applicant should consider, such as a draft easement between the two proposed lots for shared usage of parking areas, site plan review if and when the applicant is authorized to submit a preliminary plan application, and in that they should submit a site plan review application with their preliminary plan application. And that the DRB should consider alternative setback standards, since this new line would essentially create would necessitate an alternative side yard setback of 0 feet. Due to the fact that this is a modification of a PUD and a re-subdivision, this is considered a major subdivision. At this point, staff would defer to the applicant. Oh.
Thank you.
Mr. Marshall, I'm sorry.
Very good. For the record, I'm Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates, and Ravi has placed up on the wall here the site plan that accompanied this particular sketch plan application. The Shelburne Green North area, it was the original redevelopment of the historical manufacturing facilities that were basically bound by Sinashore Drive as well as Route 7. North is straight up on this particular plan. And this is what we call Shelburne Green South. This has been a number of presentations before the board, as well as a later one tonight. This particular application seeks to take the 20-plus acre property and divide it into two approximately halves. The intent of this particular line is to basically respect that this particular parking here actually supports the uses within these conjoined buildings. We looked at perhaps creating a line that didn't create specific setback issues or requests for waivers in regards to the existing structures that are located at this particular component of Shelburne Green South, but felt that because this is a planned unit development that we would approach the board about supporting a line that inherently, when you look at it from the sky, makes sense that it be drawn at this particular location, and that rather than drawing it through the middle of a parking lot and creating an easement that supports the Shelburne Green North component that we seek, supporting waivers that would enable the line to basically be drawn in what appears in, for the layperson, the most practical location if we were trying to divide the Shelburne North component from Shelburne Green South. With that, staff has recommended some particular ideas as far as what the setbacks should be, whether it be from the parking or from the building. And we're very supportive of those open ideas that were presented in the staff report. Without belittling anything further, you know, we don't have to seek any specific waivers as far as lot coverage or building coverage within either of the two proposed lots, because as it turns out that we remain compliant even when you split them, and that puts aside another discussion that even within planned unit developments you can have one lot with more than what's allowed for lot coverage, for example, as long as the entire PUD property complies with the rules. We don't have that discussion tonight because the numbers just happen to work out nicely. So to basically keep things simple, it is a proposed simple subdivision of the land, no other work associated with it, and I think now is a good time for me to allow the board to pose any questions.
So, you said you had no problem with some of the draft suggestions that Ravi's put in his staff report?
I think that's a fair representation.
Okay. And any questions from board members? Okay. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment or testify on this particular application? Sir, if you'd step up to the microphone, please. I'll swear you in.
Thank you. I'm David Stewart. I live at the Gables. Just curious as
Hang
to...
on a second, sir. I need to swear you in.
Oh, did you swear him in?
I'm sorry.
I don't think you
did
did.
not. David? I apologize. David, do you swear?
Yes.
Do you two gentlemen swear or affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank
As
you
well as
very
everything
much.
else I've already
Thank you,
stated.
sir, for reminding me of that. And your name again, sir?
David Stewart. I'm just curious as to why they want to split it in two. We have no objection on its face. I'm just curious.
I think Mr. Marshall addressed that, but I'll let him elaborate on that.
Any subdivision ultimately allows for subsequent transfer of property to occur in a more easier nature. So I think in this particular case, it's going to enable the Shelburne Green South operations to be split off from the north.
Okay. Does that address your questions?
Not really.
Okay, well, sorry.
Can operate as one unit?
Well,
It
I'm not
can
gonna
operate as one unit
gonna offer
under separate ownership. Yep.
I'm not going to offer any comment on that. Any other comments from the board? Anyone else from the public who would like to comment on this application? Okay. That being said, we have some draft motion language in our staff report, I believe. Would anybody like to make any motions, or I'd be glad to do that myself? Okay, well, first off, I would make a motion to classify sketch plan application SUB 02R4 as a major subdivision. As well as I would move to finalize the record and close the hearing for this sketch plan application SUB 1302R4. And finally, I would move to authorize the applicant Shelburne Green to file a preliminary plan application on the materials presented for this application with the three conditions as noted in the staff report.
I'll second the motion.
All right,
Motions.
motions, very good. We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No, motion carries. Thank you. All right, so that takes us to what was item number 8, which is now item number 7 on the agenda, which is application SUB 1302R3, which is a continuation of an application by Shelburne Green for preliminary plan review and site plan review to substantially, or I'm sorry, let's say to modify the previous conditions of approval. The property is at 120 Graham Way, and is located in the Commerce and Industry South District and the Stormwater Overlay District. So in general, I'll ask anybody who wants to be on the record here, if you're here to testify or you want to be noted as party to this hearing, you should sign in on the sheet so it's a matter of record. And I'm going to ask anybody who's going to speak to, when they do step up to the microphone, I need to swear you in and to give us your name and identify yourself. So, that being said, who's going to testify this evening? I'm just going to do a little mass swear-in, if you don't mind. If you would all please stand up. And I will ask you to, that's for this particular hearing. Okay? This is for this particular item on the agenda. Okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And I'll ask you to identify yourself when you come up. Do you hereby swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Do you have to do it twice?
No, I think you're good, sir. Gotcha. We'll go 6 on that. All right. Ravi.
So this application was first heard on January 16th and was continued to February 6th and then subsequently continued to February 20th due to a lack of quorum for this hearing on February 6th. Staff has received one new item for the record from the applicant. This is a letter of correspondence between the applicant Shelburne Green and the Gables, noting a number of items and resolutions that they propose. Staff has highlighted following points from this application, from this letter. One being point number E, the cafe as proposed and described in Shelburne Green's preliminary plan application material submitted to the DRB on January 18, 2019 will stop the service of food and beverages at 9 p.m. And then on the second page, proposed point F, proposed building 10 may be constructed anywhere south of the proposed building 6, north and west of the PUD setback line and east of the north-south parking lot. In addition, this building may range in size from 2,560 square feet to 10,000 square feet. Point G, proposed buildings 7 and 9 shall not exceed a combined size of 10,000 square feet and may be joined as one building not to exceed 10,000 square feet, regardless of whether one or two things as proposed buildings 7 or 9 shall be located south of the southern east-west parking lot, west of the north-south parking lot, and north of the PUD setback line in the general vicinity of proposed buildings 7 and 9, currently depicted as Exhibit 1. And further on, let's see, in the paragraph right below, points A through J, to quote, and to further require in any future lease agreement with Fiddlehead Brewing for the new project space that Fiddlehead limit its special event permits from the town of Shelburne to 4 per year with any live music at these events stopping at 7 p.m. or otherwise obtain an agreement from Fiddlehead to the foregoing limitations. On these points, staff would recommend possibly asking the applicant more information about these things due to the fact that certain items were not mentioned in their application materials previously. And with the last point, staff has reiterated that this PUD has not been approved for concerts, music events, and has repeatedly told the applicant that concerts and music events cannot be hosted there, and that the town does not issue special event permits. So at this point, I would defer to the applicant or the DRB.
All right. Does anybody have any opposition to entering this document into the record? Because it's not in the record at this point, is it, Ravi?
Not yet, no.
Okay. So do we want to give this a specific exhibit number, Ravi, or just the attribution letter from Shelburne Green on February 6th? Is that sufficient?
I think this can be entered in as Exhibit A into the record.
Exhibit
A,
8?
A,
A.
yes. For
Okay.
this hearing in particular, I don't recall at the moment the exhibits that have been entered for this application at the moment.
And
So,
I'll make a motion to enter this Exhibit A, the letter dated February 6, 2019, from Shelburne Green to Ms. Ann Powell, the president of the Gables Area Association.
Second that.
Seconded. All those in favor? Okay, that passes. All right, so I will defer to the applicants to have them give some additional testimony based on.
Very good. Thank you again, Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates. When we appeared before the board a while back, we had introduced the concept of modifying the site plan to reflect further discussions that had occurred with representatives of the Gables. The Gables homes are located on the east side of the 20-acre Shelburne Green project area. In this particular plan, north is straight up. Route 7 is over here on the left-hand side. And Shelburne Green South is generally, again, the southern half of this particular property. And as far as structures that are currently built, we have these buildings that I'm highlighting in the northwest corner. Currently, the Shelburne Green South project has a building envelope that basically allows for just over 70,000 square feet of buildings to be constructed in almost a reverse C in this particular configuration. And out of all that, one of the goals of the original master plan was to create basically an envelope of activities where the backside of the buildings would be what we call cold walls, where there wouldn't be activity areas associated with them, with both loading, unloading, and as well as parking, all located within the interior, what I'll call, of the buildings around the perimeter of the Shelburne Green South building envelope area. And in this particular case, the proposal that we briefly showed the board and now have formalized is basically a reinforcement of that original concept as far as bringing buildings or situating them in such a way where the activity area is basically shielded from the remaining residential areas. And that is reinforced in a way in which we have a proposed building 6 that is being attached to the buildings on the northerly portion to again complete, you know, what otherwise had been identified as potential openings between the buildings. And this is the point of interest here is that a discussion point, a lively discussion point, has been the proposed cafe. A cafe that is approved currently as far as 2,500 square feet, but as far as its location and character has been a continued discussion point. In this particular case, what the proposed cafe has been done is basically been tucked up into the north, proposed to be tucked up into the northwest corner of Building 6 to be able to utilize the entire building as a sound barrier from the residential uses on the east side of this particular property. So that particular approach has done a couple things. One, it has conjoined these 3 buildings into one, and that is one of the specific requests of the board as far as a modification. The original application had identified multiple buildings with one particular structure being up to 20,000 square feet. We have found a tenant that wants to grow in place. And in order to basically provide an appropriate level of operations, they feel that the buildings need to be connected. One of the goals of the original project was to break up the mass. So we didn't have a, sorry, we'll throw the teddy bear under the bus today. But when you drive down Route 7 and you see the teddy bear storage facility, you say, wow, that's a big building. What this particular project did was basically take the cues of what was done with Shelburne Green North and break up the mass of that particular building, and with a number of small additions, and it looks much different than it did prior to the improvements being made. And again, the architecture of the existing and proposed buildings is such that, again, we're trying to break up mass so that when you look at it from Route 7 or drive into the site, that it doesn't present itself as one large building. So that being one of the components, another aspect of the discussions with the Gables was how to basically deal with management of the cafe itself. And one thing that is of note is that currently the Shelburne Green South operations does run 24 hours a day. And there is staff there, not only 24 hours a day, but other businesses are also there after 6 o'clock. So the original approval had anticipated an operation time frame of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. because that was the best available information we had before there was a single tenant. Now this particular application has stated that they wanted to shift that 12-hour period from 10 in the morning to 10 at night. But now, as part of the proposal, both verbally as well as what is written, and hopefully we're currently working with the Gables on a signed agreement, is that the actual food and beverage sales would stop at 9 o'clock. So we're trying to basically bring that into more normal hours in regards to what the population would be looking for, but at the same time recognize that stopping at 6 based on not only the 24 operation of the Fiddlehead Brewery, but also the fact that many of the owners of the businesses are working beyond 6 o'clock, that at this point their support is that looking for expanded hours to basically meet their particular food and beverage needs. So that is one of the significant, well, it is a change. You can identify what the significance of that is. And with that, one of these other changes is just circulation on the south end. If you recall, in your mind's eye, an old plan, it basically mirrored what's currently happening on the north end, except that there was no outlet. So you came down, drove in, and basically you ended up having to turn around in a cul-de-sac. Or in this particular case, we've now kind of morphed the cul-de-sac into a turning area that basically allows people to come down and come back around and back out. So we feel that that's a smoother operation opportunity as far as this particular layout. The other thing that struck me as part of the proposal to yourselves and the Gables was that the original master plan had 70,550 square feet of industrial and commercial use identified as part of the master plan approval. All of the traffic studies were based upon that. All the other supporting water and sewer components were based on that. And this application did technically ask for more. We are now retracting that and going back to the original approval so that there can't be any claims of exceeding what the original intent of Shelburne Green South is. So we're basically going back to the original number. And with that, that basically means that the remaining buildings do have a limited amount of opportunity. One of the things in the proposed agreement with the Gables is that none of the buildings would exceed 10,000 square feet in size. At the same time, these two buildings that buttress the southern end of the site could be combined. Again, we've always tried to be flexible based on tenants and what their particular needs are. We'd like to retain that flexibility as far as the number of buildings, as long as we don't exceed what the total commercial square footage that the original master plan was approved for. So that's kind of a big picture. The other things that the proposed agreement with the Gables calls for is supplemental landscaping along this eastern edge to, again, buttress what is already out there today. And again, that's just another way of basically trying to, any of the activities that somebody might be able to see between the buildings, it will specifically provide at least improved buffering and screening. There are other things that Revy didn't choose to highlight, but it goes back to, again, the aesthetic of this commercial use adjacent to the residential, and it just talks about colors of buildings and colors of roofs, something we're not in a design review district here, but nonetheless, it just represents, again, the proposed cooperation between the two parties in regards to how to make this as amenable, within reason, as possible as far as a neighbor to the existing Gables residents to the east. That's a very quick summary of the proposed modifications in regards to the original application that had been submitted to the board. Things that have been submitted as far as paperwork. Beyond that, there was a rebuttal to some of the staff comments that's in your package. And I think out of all that, perhaps now is a better time to allow the board to ask questions as far as what they've seen and what they've read, so we can fill in some blanks for you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. So I would open it up to questions of the applicant from the board. Anybody have anything? David, your rebuttal. It's is there anything you'd like to add to that, or you think this pretty well covers everything in your
We tried to rebut anything that we felt was inconsistent as far as what we believe the application materials that had been presented to the board and how they supported the application. Other than that, all the remaining portions of the staff report are acceptable. But in this particular case, what we tried to do was...
We'd like to address the most recent one, though, as well. That rebuttal was to the older one.
I've been told by counsel that I perhaps should turn over the microphone. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Peter Raymond. I'm also here on behalf of Shelburne Green. Just briefly.
You're an attorney representing the...
I am, yes.
Okay.
The most recent staff report, the date escapes me. I think it was issued for the last hearing that was then continued. There's a couple of issues that we need to address in that. The first is a discussion of the compliance with the town plan. A large portion of the staff report was devoted to that. The 3 points on compliance with the town plan. The Vermont Supreme Court has, there's cited cases within the staff report, but subsequent to those, and those are not incorrect, but subsequent, the case law has actually developed even further. One of the guiding principle that has come from the court is that statements in a town plan, general policy abstractions are not enforceable like a zoning regulation are. So a general goal, a general policy, a general suggestion is not something that is binding on an applicant. It is noteworthy that what is referenced in staff report is actually a description of where the commercial and industrial areas are located within Growth Area 2 in the town plan. One of those being to the south and east, to the south of the village and east of Route 7, which is precisely where this project is located, being in a commercial and industrial area. So this use is consistent with that identification. Staff has suggested that because that they foresee somehow the 2,500 square feet becoming a primary use. I note that as Dave discussed, this is only for 2,500 square feet. The cafe portion that's approved in the existing permits. There's nothing before the DRB that suggests that is going to expand. There's going to be approximately 68,000 square feet of commercial and industrial primary uses remaining in the PUD, and as the site plan shows, where the cafe is actually going to be located, it's going to be a very small portion. The third point is that the staff report does not mention that one of the goals of the Commerce and Industry District in the zoning regs is actually to support the economic development portions of the town plan. And so here, this project has always been about supporting local, small-scale commercial development that is aesthetically pleasing and appropriate for the area, which is entirely consistent with the goals of the town plan, which is a stated policy for this zoning district. Switching to the letter that was shown to you at the beginning regarding the Gables, I would just mention that there is no proposal before you regarding any special events or anything from Fiddlehead. That is not part of the application, so there's no need to address that here as staff had suggested.
Very good. Any questions?
If I could, before council sits down, is it your understanding that the individual members of the Gables Area Association are bound by the decision of the association as reflected in the agreement?
Well, 2 points to that. I don't believe that has been, there's not a signed copy before you. I think that is a proposal that is before the Gables Association now. And the way I've read that is in agreement with the Gables Association. Individual members are free to do what they want.
So if the agreement is to be signed by the association and the applicant, and based upon that agreement, this board takes action, but an individual members of the Gables challenges and seek an appeal in environmental court, what happens to your agreement?
Well, it's a little bit of a legal hypothetical that I'm not sure I've completely analyzed, but just a general thought: if a individual is acting on their own, yeah, I don't know the Gables bylaws or how that organization is structured, so I can't really speak to that. But just like any individual who can satisfy the interested party components of the appeal law, I don't see why that would be improper.
So if an individual were to take an appeal to the environmental court, you would still feel bound by the agreement that you have with the Gables Association?
I'm not sure I can answer that at this point. I think when...
Because I would assume one of the reasons behind the agreement is to spare having to appeal this matter before the environmental court.
I think it's the agreement is one to recognize that the Gables has raised concerns, and Shelburne Green has tried to address those concerns while also continuing to promote the economic viability of its project. And so that I think that was the primary goal one, and in recognition of the changes that Shelburne Green has made, which will be at substantial cost to Shelburne Green, that the Gables in return will agree to support as far as an association. That was the intent.
Sure.
It's still, we are still discussing with the Gables, so that may not be a final version. I think that I think it was intended to show the ongoing negotiations.
Then would it be your preference that we await any decision in this matter until there is a final agreement with the Gables Association?
I don't think that's what we're asking for now. If the board feels that they're comfortable making a decision on the preliminary plan application, we would not request that you wait.
All right, thank you.
The agreement with the Gables is really between Shelburne Green and the Gables. It's not meant to bind or in any way be require the board to do anything in either direction.
And again, Dave Marshall, just to clarify a bit further, the reason we gave you that piece of paper was to identify what the applicant is willing to change their application before you to include. So even if they went away, we're very happy conforming with those particular bullet points in support of the application.
Regardless of what happens in any future discussions with the Gables Association?
Our application...
Or if an individual member takes an appeal to the environmental court?
I would like to think that what we have promised on that particular piece of paper would represent what we have proposed to move forward with.
All right, thank you.
No questions.
So I'll open it up to anyone else, and is there anyone else on behalf of the applicant that would like to testify first? So we get all their information on the table. All right, I then would open it up to public testimony. Go ahead, sir. Did I swear you in, sir?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you.
It's hard to know where to stand to.
You don't have to stand, but
Stand out to the side, so I'm not standing in front of anybody?
it's totally up to you.
Okay. My name is Clark Hinsdale, and I am a member of the Nancy Hinsdale Revocable Trust. Which is this unit right here. It's right here, right here. And I think I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because you've been given a piece of information that I haven't seen. I don't know how that works in your process in terms of a shifting target for what's being reviewed to be approved. But when I read this later tonight, it'll be the first time I've seen this proposed agreement. Secondly, I would note that unless there's someone here from the Gables board to say otherwise, it's just a proposed agreement by the applicant, period. I don't even know what it's doing is evidence. It has no probative value. It's not an executed agreement. And I think maybe it simply recommends, it simply includes some materials that the applicant may be willing to change in their negotiations with you. But I just find it somewhat incredulous to come to a meeting like this when I've been involved on a daily basis with the Gables and find this presented. Ravi, I turned in a map and testimony. Did you share that with the board?
Not yet.
Okay. A month or so ago, I turned in some written testimony and a map, which Ravi's got copies of for you. This is going to be hard to see, and I'll go over to the other map to point out my point. What this map shows is where your regulations allow restaurants. And that's this strip that's colored in orange. Which would be 200 feet from Route 7, and I don't think, this doesn't show Route 7. I don't know if it can be moved to show, is this? Yeah, okay, it's Route 7 over here. So this is the 100-foot line, and so imagine a 200-foot line. So there's a swath of land right here that under your zoning regulations you allow restaurants. Behind that, it's not even a conditional use. It's just, as the staff report says, something that's simply not allowed in the district more than 200 feet from Route 7. Obviously, one of the things that Shelburne was thinking about was the fact that A, Route 7 is already noisy, and having a restaurant there doesn't necessarily make it any noisier. B, in terms of traffic flow, policing, services, and so on and so forth, it would be keeping a heavily used public facility close to Route 7. When you have a chance to look at your copy of the map, what I'm trying to point out here is that the applicant is asking for the maximum possible variance from the rules. That not only is the restaurant not proposed within the area where restaurants are allowed, the restaurant is proposed to be at the extreme other end, right up against the residential buffer. Like I say, representing the maximum possible variance anybody could ask for. Now, I've heard the term cafe thrown around. I'm very familiar with the original approval and the concept of a cafe primarily for the people who work there. This is not a cafe. I would refer you to the staff report. It's a restaurant. And the second question is whether or not it was foreseeable that the development of this facility would lead to the need for a restaurant. And the claim has been that it was not foreseeable. Any of you who have ever been to the pizza and beer place on Route 7 and seen the success of that endeavor, the cooperation between the pizza place and Fiddlehead, the parking that fills the parking lot and spreads across the street to the vineyard property, knows that that enterprise has been tremendously successful. And it's beyond my imagination that anyone would not think in developing the beer facility further back that one of the economic drivers of their facility could be a beer garden, pizza place, restaurant, et cetera. So what I'd like to point out is that the applicant had available property that was zoned to have a restaurant. They didn't choose to put a restaurant there. They chose to put other things there. So having chosen not to put the restaurant where the restaurant's allowed, they're now proposing to put it the minimum number of feet back from a residential area. And obviously this is the residence that's most severely affected. This is a wetland, so the noise just pretty much goes right across to all the neighbors. I think, and in my testimony that you don't have that I turned in, I think Shelburne has worked very, very hard and very, very successfully to take a vibrant business community and a large and active residential community and to be able to create rules and regulations that create an appropriate buffer between those activities. And that's from the South Burlington line all the way down almost to the Charlotte line, that you deal with this issue over and over and over. And I think that it's very, very important for residents to be able to count on the rules and regulations that you as a community have established. I don't have anything against Fiddlehead. I wish them nothing but the best. I just think that this is trying to put a round peg in a square hole after the fact, and that one of the purposes of master planning is to avoid those kind of situations. I got here just too late to speak to the early application, so I won't. But we've really got a moving target here. We've got this application that's been verbally modified tonight by a letter that was just handed to you. You've got a subdivision application in process on the same property, begging the question of when you've taken advantage of all the flexibility that the PRD regs allow, gotten everything you can get there, do you then say, oh gosh, we don't want to do a PRD anymore, now we want to do subdivision? The credits for parking and circulation, everything was calculated based on the overall density in the master plan, not a little here and a little here and a little here. So I just would really, really encourage you to recognize that that the majority of the people at the Gables, including my mother, are in Florida right now. It just happens that that neighborhood, which is not a retirement community, has been favored by people of retirement age. And so therefore, the peace and quiet over there is particularly important to the people who are there. I'm sure I'm missing some things on my notes on the other side, but I think that this was foreseeable, that the decision to put Fiddlehead's manufacturing facility at the back of the facility was a choice that was made by the developer and the tenant, and that it's just simply not fair to the community to say, okay, now that we've staked out a place in the back corner of the property, we now want to do something that's only allowed within 200 feet of Route 7. So I think that's the crux of what I'd like to say. I appreciate the opportunity. I was a resident of this town a long time ago, and my mother is now. And So thank you.
Mr. Hinsdale, when was you submitted that map in advance? In
It's been
advance?
continued a couple of times since.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
It was before the first meeting.
Yep. My
And,
apologies.
and a memo with it.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Actually, I have a question for.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, Norm, thank you.
Before you sit down, can I ask you a question? Sure. When your mother purchased the property that you've been testifying to, was there in place at that time the cafe, whatever you want to call it, that had as a provision it had to stop operation at 6 o'clock?
My mother purchased the property in 99 or 2000, in the winter of 99. She has been at many of your meetings and has followed this process through from the 2013 beginnings of the process, participated in conversations with the applicant and the applicant's son, worked out an agreement with the applicant that says specifically that the food service, which is 2,500 square feet, 6 to 6, would be located on the west side of the parking lot. And that's in an original signed 2014 agreement between the Gables and the applicant. So my testimony is, yes, she's been here the whole time and participated in the process from the beginning.
Has she engaged in any detrimental reliance? Has she either not taken action with respect to her property or anything else with the understanding that that 6 o'clock time change would stay in place in forever, in perpetuity? Does my question make any sense? In other words, did she make the decision? Did she make the decision to stay at the homestead, her place, because she relied on the fact that that 6 o'clock time change would, that 6 o'clock time would never change?
I think that was why the Gables entered an agreement with the applicant in 2014. Is they were thinking that if food service was on the other side of the parking lot, there was a parking lot and a building in between the Gables and that would provide a fair amount of relief. My mother's 87 years old and walks with a walker, and she intends to live in her home as long as she's physically able.
You're probably aware that we have to review this under a Vermont Supreme Court case called Stowe Club Highlands. And in that case, there was a neighbor who made the contention before the board that he had made decisions about his property based upon the circumstances that existed under the terms of the original permit. In other words, I can't remember. I think in that case, he bought the property believing that the terms of the original permit would stay in place forever. Is your mother in that same situation, to your knowledge?
I don't think so. She just wants to continue to do what she's been doing for 20 years, which is to live there and enjoy her garden and grounds and neighbors. I think the Stowe decision also addressed the foreseeability of, which is why I addressed it briefly earlier. And I think it's very, very hard to come to the conclusion based on the Fiddlehead's previous location on Route 7, co-located with a restaurant. It's really, really a stretch to say that they couldn't have anticipated that a food service operation would be a critical a part of their business plan. So I think that's the stronger point. My mother's done nothing but enjoy living there for the last 20 years.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have questions of Mr. Hinsdale? Okay. Yes, sir.
Just very briefly, the
Identify yourself, Senator Marianne.
Peter Raymond again. I think Mr. Blaze was asking about the Stowe Club decision. I'd remind the board that was already addressed several hearings ago. And secondly, I'm unfamiliar with any restriction that would place the cafe in a particular location. The DRB's past approvals have been 2,500 square feet. And so the only change here is really the hours of operation shift from 6 to 6 to 10 to 10.
Absolutely not true.
In the 2014.
You can come up and testify, sir.
Oh, I'm not coming to you.
So I have a copy here of your decision in 2014. I'm David Stewart. I live at the Gables. And I'm going to read, this is the findings of fact and notice of decision dated 2014. And item 7 of that decision from the Design Review Board speaks to exactly what he has just said is the opposite. No more than 20% of the area of any tenant unit in the PUD up to a maximum of 1,500 square feet within said tenant unit shall be occupied by accessory uses as defined in section 2110.3 of the zoning bylaw. Further, no more than 2,500 square feet may be occupied by a food service use accessory to the PUD as a whole. Okay, so far we're good. Further, and here's the key point, any food service activities conducted under the aforementioned 2,500 square feet allowance may operate between the hours of 6 a.m. 6 p.m. only, Monday through Sunday, and further, such food service activities shall not be located in buildings 8, 7, or 12, or east of the western edge of the north-south drive parking area. This is your own PUD. And that is clearly very far east of it.
Okay. And you, who's next? There were 5 people or 6 people got sworn in. Changed your minds? Okay.
Notwithstanding all of that, we are still trying to work out.
We need to use, sir, if you're going to speak, I need you to use the microphone, please. Are you all set? Okay, thank you. Is anyone else like to give any testimony this evening? Okay. All right. Our mission here is to take testimony. I believe I'm not inclined to close the hearing. I think the fact that we got that letter dated February 6th tonight was not exactly timely, and it is in fact just a proposal. It is not an agreement per se. Do you have any plan? I'd like to ask the applicant, do you, sir, have any plans to execute this agreement and attempt to execute this agreement in the near future? Or Norman, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, we had Norman Stanislaus, property manager at Shelburne Green. The agreement was provided to the Gables Association. They have since forwarded the agreement to their council. Currently, their council is reviewing verbiage of the agreement, and we're waiting to hear back from the board on whether or not they're prepared to execute the agreement as currently written, or if we need to look at amending the agreement.
Mr. Marshall, would you happen to have a plan available that you could put up for everyone that shows the previously approved plan? Do you have that up there or not? Because the reason I ask that is if I'm not mistaken, I poured through some of this stuff over the last few days. The traffic circulation has changed. Am I correct in saying that?
That is correct.
And the configuration of the buildings has
primarily on the south end.
Right.
So the remnants of the original concept, if you can, where this is being highlighted as far as the north leg and the center portion, if you could imagine this mirrored in the southerly direction, yep, would represent the original concept. And what the condition of approval talked about was the western edge of the eastern north-south parking lot that the cafe would generally be located west of that particular point. So that's what the condition of approval talked about, in my opinion.
All right, and then the other reason I'm inclined to want to continue this is because of the fact that I think there are some substantive changes here that should be reviewed by fire and rescue, given the fact that the traffic circulation has changed at a minimum, you know. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at that, so.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in all fairness to Mr. Hinsdale, I think the board should have a chance to see his memorandum and whatever written testimony he would like to submit.
Yes.
As well as his exhibit. I would concur. So, and if anyone, I'll just say this to anyone else, if you do have anything else you'd like to get in front of the board, please get it to us in a timely fashion, and it'll help expedite this process, and it makes it a lot easier for us to do our job here. So, with that in mind, I'm going to suggest that we continue the hearing. I'd make a motion to continue this hearing to the next available slot, which is it's in March.
March. Trying to think of availability. It'd be the 6th or the 20th.
Would you like to do it until the 6th? We have to do it time specific, and then if there's no room, we could continue it?
Yes, we'll do it that way.
Is that fair?
Yes, and it's contingent upon soliciting comments from the fire department and rescue department upon the board's request, if you'd like.
All right, then that would be, hang on here, March 6th, you say? Yes, March 6th. So I'd make a motion then to continue this hearing to March the 6th of 2019. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
You bet. All right. I guess we better go, yeah, why don't you grab those guys? They're probably in there watching YouTube videos or something. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well, thank you.
All right.
Pass the baton.
Whew. All right, I got the bridge again. Woo. All right. On to application SUB 16-2, which has been continued from a previous session. Morey and Dickinson Consultant Engineering's on behalf of Snyder Group, final plan review of proposed 91-unit residential plan unit development, property at 5760 Spear Street, residential district, stormwater overlay district, floodwater and watercourse overlay district. All right, we don't have Ravi here. As I recall, when we last met, we were talking about stormwater runoff. And there was a concern about stormwater coming from unit development down to lower properties. Do I have that correct? Correct. All right. I saw there's quite a bit of analysis that was done. So, yes, sir. We will do that. Thank you. All right. All right. So I just kicked it off while you were out, so I think we're good. All right. Would the applicant like to address us? I'll swear him in. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pains of penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right. You do too. Okay, so you're both in.
So last time we were here, there was not an abutting property owner, but a downslope property owner, Mr. Shover, who lives on Webster Lane, who raised concerns of the stormwater runoff from the project upon his property. And although the stormwater system for the Quiniasca neighborhood Fairway at Spear had been oversized, there was a concern that while that improved the existing condition, in the applicant's opinion, that was not going to be sufficient to ameliorate the problems that he currently experienced on his property. And the applicant worked with Dave Marshall, engineer for Mr. Shover, and reached, I believe they've reached an agreement whereby the south pond would be expanded even further to further increase the detention provided and reduce the peak discharge from the pond in order to reach a threshold that, in consultation with Mr. Shover and his engineer, achieved a level that was satisfactory. And so those plans were provided to the town on about February 6th, so that staff would have a chance to look at those and provide input to the board rather than coming to the board on February 6th and staff not having a chance to digest that. I think that has been done. I think staff commented that there were no concerns with that expansion, and the applicant, as I said, is pleased to have worked out an agreement, we believe, with the abutting property owner, or downstream property owner, not abutting property owner.
Okay. Mr. Marshall, is there anything like that?
I think that's well summarized. We appreciate the applicant's willingness to work with the downstream abutters in regards to further mitigation efforts. And out of all that, the plans that were submitted to the board represent what had been previously shared with us as far as the proposed improvements and modifications to the outlet structures and the pond itself to, again, achieve those particular goals. And out of all that, we're here to support the application as presented to the board.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Last outstanding issue that I recall. I'm assuming that sorry, go ahead, Mark.
If you could, Andrew, if you could just kind of illustrate kind of the magnitude of what your revised stormwater proposal and basically the existing impact on downstream versus what you're proposing, just to kind of give us an illustration of the magnitude of what,
in terms
hypothetically, in terms of your model, is you're going to produce for results.
In terms of peak discharge from the pond, not
Yes.
in terms of how much bigger the pond got necessarily.
Yes. Yeah.
So there really wasn't much of a change in terms of the one-year storm. And again, when I talk about one-year storm or 10-year storms, it's a certain volume of precipitation over a 24-hour period. So there really isn't much change for the one-year storm. There was a substantial reduction. Originally proposed for the 10-year storm, the pre-development is 21, and I'm going to round these off to the nearest whole number here. The pre-development was 21 CFS. The post-development originally presented was about 9.5. It was reduced to about 5 CFS, so 21 to 5 is where it is now. For the 25-year storm, the yardstick that was suggested by the Mr. Shover's engineer as the point that achieved a certain level of comfort or satisfaction in terms of his property. The pre-development was 31 CFS. That was reduced to a little over 9 CFS. And then...
Where are you measuring this flow rate at? Is this at the discharge pond?
This is the discharge from the pond, correct.
Okay. Whereas before it was pretty much just a flow through, not even retention.
Correct. Very little detention provided in the existing pond because there was no control structure. The water that goes in, so long as the pond is full, equals water going out.
Got it.
And then for the 100-year storm, the pre-development peak flow was a little over 47 CFS, and that's been reduced to a little over 22 CFS now.
Okay.
Okay. Cubic feet per second. And also, Mr. Rowe, in your opinion, you know, based on this grading plan you've given us, existing versus proposed, would you say that that you're changing the amount of, you're increasing, decreasing, or keeping the same the amount of flow coming from upland to downstream across, but not going to the pond? Are you, try to summarize, are you capturing more water north of the pond, the south pond, than you were previously in terms of this area to the north? I mean, are you redirecting a lot more water into the pond, or?
No, I think the drainage areas are generally staying the same between pre-development and post-development.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I guess as kind of a peer review, Mr. Marshall, I mean, you've looked this over and you're comfortable with the way the modeling was put together and
Yes, that was primarily our focus point in regards to confirming the information that Andy put together and making sure that, again, that it would achieve the intended goal of our client.
Thank you. Okay.
Any questions from the board? Questions from the public? Comments?
Unrelated to, well, tangential to stormwater, but unrelated to this subject matter right here, I do have written testimony from abutting property owners from Collimer Court regarding the swale on the northern portion of the property that they were unaware of in the plans and were a bit caught off guard by it. The applicant has received this written testimony as well, so this shouldn't be a surprise to the applicant from our understanding.
Okay. Has there been a change in the plans that has caused this to come to their attention, or is it just the abutters just noticed it now? Something changed that brought this up.
There was a change between preliminary and final plans. One of the preliminary conditions from the board was to add a diversion swale along the northerly property line so that while the stormwater collection system along the new streets intercepted a certain amount of runoff that is currently being directed northerly from the golf course onto the rear of the Collimer Court and Collimer Circle lots, that is sort of a belt and suspenders approach. The DARB asked that an additional diversion swale be constructed along the rear of the lots to direct runoff in a westerly direction rather than have it flow in a northerly and northwesterly direction onto the rear of the Collimer Court, Collimer Circle lots. So that was added to plans originally presented to the board with the final application. I'm not sure specifically who those comments were from, but we did take the opportunity to meet with Emile Fournier and his wife. I forget her name, and I know the applicant has also had discussions with Kate Fournier, the property immediately to the west of them. And just to recap, the purpose of that diversion swale was to direct the water to the west. The notes on the plan indicate that that will be a combination of ditching and or berming, one or the other, or a combination of both. And I believe the notes on the plans also indicate that that may meander in order to avoid mature trees. The applicant has no desire to cut any more trees down than absolutely necessary to construct that diversion swale. Any tree cut down has to be moved out. And so in our discussions with the Fourniers, we've indicated that, you know, a clearing width of 15 to 20 feet at most in order to construct that can be expected. But again, that it would meander through the woods wherever possible in order to avoid trees, sort of take the path of least resistance in its construction in order to minimize any amount of clearing or disturbance to the existing vegetation. And I guess I would also point out that that diversion swale is about 50 feet, 45 to 50 feet off of the property lines, the northerly project property line, about 50 feet off of those Collimer Court, Collimer Circle rear property lines. And as it heads west, there's an increasing width of a buffer between that diversion ditch and the clearing limits along the back of the proposed lots. So that 50 feet that I mentioned between the diversion ditch and the rear of the lots along Colomer Court and Colomer Circle doesn't represent the only vegetated buffer that would remain. There's also vegetated buffer to the south of the diversion ditch to the new lots along the new public street.
All right. Do you feel like you've resolved this with the?
After meeting with Emil and his wife, I think they hadn't seen a copy of the plan. We left a couple copies of the plans with them, explained what had happened, and it was my understanding that they were satisfied, and the applicant expressed to them his willingness to meet with them prior to the work being done, provided his contact information and let them know that, you know, the clearing, vegetation disturbance associated with that construction of the diversion ditch would be minimized, and it was my understanding that once they understood where that fell and that there was both a vegetated area that would be remaining undisturbed to the north of it and an area to the south.
So to summarize, what you really did is you educated them on what you're doing. Did you change any of the final plan? Okay,
no,
so
we
it's
simply
really just informing them of what's happening.
Inform them of what was being proposed,
Do
correct.
we have anything from them that says they understand it better and they're okay?
I have not received anything
right.
since.
My concern is we have an abutment owner that submitted a concern. It may or may not have been addressed. Clearly, an attempt was made, but we don't know the final outcome of that. And I think what we're doing is we're on the verge of closing the hearing.
Am I correct in understanding that the swale was in effect added to the initial plans at the DRB's request?
Right.
That is correct.
I remember that. Yeah, because it's concerned about.
Quite some time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. So it's.
It was added to, it was a condition of the preliminary approval. It was added to the final plans and was reflected on the final plans submitted with the original final plan application. So it was on the plans that first came before you on January 2nd.
Okay. All right, so everything else with regards to water runoff has been addressed, so that, from my recollection, was the last item that was open.
Correct, that was the applicant's understanding as well.
Staff understanding as well, too.
Okay. All right, fellow board members, what's your opinion on closing the hearing? And really the intent is to finalize the record, which means we have this, but we have the word that you talked about it, and you think they're better, but no one's here to confirm that.
Can I ask the date of their correspondence?
What's it say there, John?
Friday, February 1st.
So we met with them on Wednesday, February 6th. It was the last night, or the board's last hearing. I met with them prior to coming to that hearing.
Okay.
At which I was present for another application.
Okay.
I mean, I think sufficient time has passed so that if there's an outstanding concern on their part, I would have hoped they would have appeared tonight or otherwise expressed their view. I mean, if this had been raised last week, then I might come to a different conclusion, but it's been 3 weeks since it was raised.
What do you guys think?
I agree. I think we should finalize the record.
Okay. All right. I'd like to make a motion to finalize the record for application SUB 16-02. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. take a look at what you've got here. Did you get a chance to look over all the notes associated with the approval?
We did. No
All right.
exceptions to the proposed conditions presented in the staff report.
Okay.
That's consistent with the things we discussed in the prior hearings.
All right, I'd like to make a motion indicate approval with motion as written. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes, carry it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
How long did that take? 3 years? Give or take? Thanks. All right. Moving on, application SUB 19-03 and SP 19-01. Application by Nimra LLC for conditional use and site plan review to expand a pre-existing non-conforming structure. Property is located at 2689 Shelburne Road in mixed use district and the stormwater overlay district. All right, Ravi, can you kick us off?
Yep. So the applicant has requested a continuance to the March 6th hearing for this item.
I have a question on it, though. So I noticed in the write-up that some of this, is this all valid in the write-up? Because I was saying here the subdivision regulations, something about a condominium, things like that?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess that'll all be explained when we continue it?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, go ahead,
So,
Mark. Sir.
I would make a motion to continue this to the March 6th, 2019 meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Okay, application SUB 16-02, application by Curran Sign Service on behalf of Shelburne Tractor LLC for site plan review use modified a previously approved lighting plan. Property is located at 3708 Shelburne Road in the mixed use district and the stormwater overlay district. All right, Ravi.
So this application has been submitted by the applicant to correct the installation of lighting that was installed without a permit. The lighting that has been installed does not conform to a previously approved plan or our regulations per section 1975. If you turn to your packets, I believe there are 2 cutoff sheets that are included, and would like to direct your attention to the cutoff sheet that was provided on February 7th, 2019, the Slim 12 sheet. This is the actual proposed lighting. The applicant first came to staff with proposed lighting that was not a full cutoff, and with some correspondence, the applicant has provided lighting that is in full conformance with our regulations per section 1975.
So the brisk 12 is out?
The brisk 12 is out.
That's good. Hope so, 'cause that's definitely not a cutoff fixture.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this lighting is dark sky compliant. The output lumens are 1,401. And the applicant would like to install 9 of these in the proposed locations as shown on the projector. At this point, staff will defer to the applicant and the DRB.
Very good. We got someone from the audience. All right.
Hi there.
Here comes the swearing. You ready? Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Could you state your name for the record?
I'm John Karen with Karen Signs.
Basically, I was requested to replace the lights that somebody else previously installed that were incorrect. That's about the extent of my knowledge of what we're doing. The spec sheet they sent me for the lights they want installed now was the Brisk 12. They sent me the wrong copy. You've got newer information. So it's basically to remove the LED fixtures that somebody else installed not too long ago that are not in conformance with what they were permitted for, and replace them with new ones yet again that are conforming.
Okay. So we're good on the slim and out with the brisk, right?
I guess.
All right.
Who comes up with those names anyways?
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I have none, no.
Any questions from the public? Well, come on up, we'll swear you in. I've got the wording down perfect. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury? I do. Can you state your name for the record?
Carolyn Brown.
All right.
So myself and my neighbors live behind Tractor Supply. And the lights were, you know, felt like we were on a different planet. I have this person, Terry Cano. I don't know if you know him. He is the Vermont section of the International Dark Sky Association, and he was the first person that I had used as a kind of an advocate for the lighting that Tractor Supply started out with, and he came to the board and they ended up putting shields on the parking lot lights. And then these new lights came in and it was, you know, way out of the regulations. So he sent me where he had, and I don't really know anything much about this at all, but he sent me the areas in the zoning bylaws that state what the light source should be and what it can't be. And I have a copy of all of those that he sent me, but I'd just like to read to you what he said in his email to me. He said, I think it's up to Ravi to make sure the submitted lighting plan meets the bylaw requirements, but I have attached screenshots of the portions of the bylaw which I think protects abutting residential properties from excess light and glare. This is done by requiring full cutoff fixtures, which I suspect is not the case with the existing wall lights, and or by supplementary shielding to prevent direct or reflected view of the light source from those properties. Simply reducing the bulb output doesn't meet the bylaw unless the new bulb is the equivalent of a 100-watt incandescent bulb or less. I suspect the plan will designate the lights on the building as security lighting to remain on all night. So I just want to give you a copy of this because I'm going to have him check it. He's in Florida right now, but when he comes back, I'll have him take a look at it. I'm hoping that it stands to, you know, that.
Robbie will take it. I'll add it to the record. Thank you.
More for your file. The one thing I did want to say also is that when they built Tractor Supply, and, you know, I mean, we weren't at one of the initial meetings, so it was, you know, our fault that we weren't that aware of what was going on. They had filled in the property behind our house. So in those bylaws.
So as I'm looking at the property, where's your house or neighborhood located with respect to the?
If you go into the parking lot, we're directly behind.
So you are to the west?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we weren't, I don't think any of us knew that they were going to level up the property to maybe a good 10, 15 feet above where it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, you know, like runoff of the parking lot had something to do with it, I don't know, but we've been flooded out, you know, many times. But on the other hand, about the lighting, if they, in the bylaws, it says that the lights have to be above a horizontal plane that could shine behind and would shine into our house. Well, they're way above that plane. And so I don't know how you know, kind of, you know, make an idea, you know, see that. I don't know. So
Well,
that was the only other thing that I wanted to say.
Okay, so Ravi, so this is before my time with Tractor Supply, and of course it was before your time, but the question is, they were still under our lighting ordinance when the facility was built, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And did the lighting ordinance address, you know, some of these concerns? Any idea?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. That would
Right.
be a question for the DRB administrator at the time. They were approved for a specific lighting plan.
Okay.
And that light and downcast shielded lighting was still a bylaw at the time.
Okay.
So the original lighting plan that's in front of you are for downcast shielded lighting per Dark Sky Association's recommendations.
Okay.
Okay.
So, some of my thoughts, okay, so, I'm sorry, any more?
No.
Okay, so some of my thoughts, go ahead, Mark.
Just a follow-up question, Robbie. So if the new lights are approved, subject to the condition that there's full compliance with Section 1975, which is the dark sky reference, will that address the concerns that the witnesses just articulated? I mean, in other words, if we make as part of any approval the requirement that that section be complied with, will that address her concerns, or do you understand her concerns to go beyond that section?
I believe it will address their concerns. Right now, what is there are not downcast lighting or shielded lighting. Having done an investigation for the past months, having visited your property and taking photos, that they're not compliant with the regulations as of right now, and that the slim lighting that's proposed would be in compliance as they are downcast shielded lighting. And the applicant has not proposed security lighting and followed through on those.
That was the other issue I was going to raise. So.
Mm-hmm. The applicant has not proposed security lighting or indicated that this would be security lighting.
We're talking about apples and oranges here. I think
Yes.
the concern she's talking about now is the pole-mounted lights that are in the parking lot.
Well, they're not on the pole, I don't think.
No, the lights you're talking about,
The original lights are pole lights.
right, so you're testing, so
And now these are lights on the building.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
these are gonna be in addition to the existing pole lights.
Exactly, yeah.
So what you're testifying is that you're experiencing some light leakage or pollution onto your property here, or no?
Well, originally, the way the lights were, without being shielded and pointed downward, they made a lot of light.
Sure.
And, you know, it was in addition to the shielded lighting, which was okay because it wasn't shining directly at us.
Right.
But what I'm wondering about is because we're so far below their plane of where they built the building, is it still going to be shielded because they seemed brighter than the
You mean
pole
the
lights?
proposed lights they're putting on the building?
Right. They're brighter. They're going to be brighter lights, I would assume, because they're
No,
shielding.
I think what they're trying to, I think what the proposal is here is to bring to change the lights that are not in compliance and
Mm-hmm.
brighter with newer lights that are in compliance and less bright. This is,
Yeah.
I mean, I've looked at enough of these to know that this is a shielded light that's gonna have a pretty significant downcast and not out.
Okay.
So,
So would they be under the guidelines that he said in this email?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was my question, whether complying with sections, the section that was cited earlier basically addresses your concerns because it requires shielded downcast lights that shouldn't be shining out
Right.
at your property.
Yeah.
But my understanding is this is not a proposal to increase the lighting brightness.
I think it's to bring them into
It's
compliance.
to
I think
actually,
you're gonna find
from your
an
property's perspective, that
an
this
improvement.
proposal reduces the lights that should be seen on your property.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought they're extra lighting though, back there.
They're replacing existing lights with these.
No.
They're not adding new.
No, they're adding new ones to the building.
Are there lights on the building now?
There are, but they were out of compliance, but they just put them up.
That's right.
That's right.
Taking them down.
And we're taking those down and replacing them, not with additional lights.
But they weren't, they were just put there.
Right.
I'm looking, I'm not gonna disagree with you, but I'm
Okay.
looking at the photometric plan that was originally submitted.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears to me that this plan indicated wall-mounted lights all the way around
You
it.
mean the original plan?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And they probably just didn't get
Didn't
installed.
do it, yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, that's my interpretation of the plan, of the plan here is that.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
clearly, the plan shows wall-mounted lights.
Correct.
Yeah.
Wall-mounted lights.
Yeah,
So here's an
okay.
idea. So let's let them have a chance to fix it, because they did indicate what their non-compliance. Let's have them a chance to fix it. Then, if you guys, check it out. And if you still think there's an issue, contact, do they have a course to work with you to see if, if they're in violation?
I have his
Yeah.
email and number.
Let's do that.
And I think, the other thing is,
Yeah.
they have, in order for them to operate these lights after hours, they have to have a quote-unquote security plan in place, which they don't have. So if I'm reading this correctly, they're obligated to turn these lights off when they close down in the evening.
Oh, because they were keeping them on 24 hours.
There's no proposed security plans.
They like a whole lot of other businesses on Shelburne Road and all over town are in violation of that
Yeah.
ordinance, so.
Okay. So if they do keep them on all night, what do I do? Call the police? That's
Call
what-
Ravi. Call Ravi. Call
Well,
Ravi.
that's what they told me when the trucks would sit in the parking lot with their engines on all night. Call the
That's
police.
a problem too.
Yeah. So you have to recognize that, we can't take action if we don't know about things.
Yeah.
But you as the public, and particularly as neighbors abutting, if you notice something that you're concerned about that might be in violation, you have to let the town know, so the town can then take action. Because
Okay.
it's not for you to have light pollution when you're not
No.
supposed to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So let's give them a chance to correct things, because it's been acknowledged that they're non-conforming.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Okay.
we should take it from there. Okay? Is that, I'll have to swear you in. Does anyone else want sworn in? We can do this all one big mass swearing? All right.
I should stand up.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Can you state your name for the record?
Kate Longmaid. I'm at 11 Bayfield Drive. So I just want to say it's not a slight leakage, and if Ravi's been to the property, he knows. It's right. It's intense, and we are not.
I'm sorry, are you referring to the lights that are on the building right now, or the lights in the parking lot?
Yes. The lights in the building, I believe.
On the building, okay.
On the building.
Very
So
good.
I'm pleased that there's a plan to at least try to address some of that. But I think it's important that the language capture the experience. So we are not directly behind Tractor Supply. We're on the corner of Bay Road and Bayfield Drive, which I don't think you can see in this picture. But you drive into the neighborhood off of Bay Road, you walk towards that part, and it's like spotlights coming through. The other thing is I just want to speak to is that initially my understanding, I was not directly involved because my property doesn't directly abut Tractor Supply, but that they offered to and agreed to plant some trees, many of which died, right? And maybe did they replace some trees for you guys? No. So
But they cut down trees. I don't know if that's something that has to go before the board.
We would check to see if there was a landscaping plan.
There was.
Okay, and if the trees are dead, that means the landscaping plan isn't being implemented.
That's
So,
right.
So you as landowners, bring it to the town's attention so we can bring it to their
Okay.
attention.
Typically, what happens is they're obligated to post a bond that guarantee that those trees survive for, what are we, 3 years? 2 years in Shelburne? 3 years in South Burlington, 2 years in Shelburne. That those trees, they bond them, so they have, if they die in the first 2 years, they have to replace them, and then there's.
A lot of the trees that they chop down.
Let me finish.
Okay,
But
sorry.
they can't just go cut trees down because it's part of their approved plan. So I think you need to bring that to Ravi's attention, and he can bring it to the property owner's attention. It's an enforcement issue.
Okay, well, it's good to know there's some recourse because I think we lost green space. The trees didn't hold up.
Yep.
And the light's been very problematic for several years. And I just will reference the neighbors, I mean, basements have been flooded. We've spent thousands of dollars removing trees. There's a right-of-way that we weren't aware. It was the town of Shelburne's when we bought our property. It was sold to Tractor Supply. It runs right through to Bay Road, the back of our neighborhood. And we have, we've had to take down, I don't know how many, 12 or so tall poplars. And we were in that, it wasn't a problem until they changed the drainage system. So there have been a lot of issues, and we have tried to address some of those issues. So I'm glad the lighting is going to be addressed, and we'll address the green space issue.
I think the stormwater issues, that could very well be an enforcement issue. There's a maintenance aspect to owning a piece of property, and if they haven't maintained their property and so that the stormwater infrastructure works properly, it could be having some adverse impact on your property.
It has.
We have a
And it's been
capable
costly,
stormwater
yeah.
people in town here that could perhaps look at that.
Yeah, and some people were looking at it. Yeah, yeah. All right, so thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so I have a question. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. When will the lights be installed?
I'm John.
Hi, John.
I'm not sure, because everything right now is on hold pending the board's decision.
Okay.
I would assume if the board approves the change, a month, maybe sooner, we might be able to get them to hurry things along.
Okay. All right. I would like to make it one of the conditions that there's a time limit imposed on when those lights get installed. So you said a month. Do you feel comfortable with that as a condition? I don't want it to go 6 months because that's not fair to the landowners.
Well, no.
But I don't want to do
no.
2 days because that's not fair
It
to
won't
you.
go 6 months, because Tractor Supply wants it done, as quickly as they want it done. But I don't know, depends on how quickly the fixtures get to us.
Okay.
Depends on our schedule, so I think a month, give or take. We're not talking 3 months down the road or 4 months.
How about 45 days? How does that sound?
That works.
All right.
All right.
At least it gets out of the.
Are you as a general audience okay with that? Okay. I'm sure. Yes, sir. I'm gonna
Sean
have to,
Sweeney, I just have a question.
I have to swear you in. Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Excellent.
So my question is, do these light bulbs meet dark sky requirements? Specifically, that's my question.
It says on the cut sheet, Mr. Sweeney, that
Okay.
it's a dark sky compliant light.
That was my question to Robbie earlier.
Okay.
By referencing in the approval section 1975.
Yeah, I didn't follow that, sorry.
That's the dark sky regulation.
Okay,
So
great.
if they meet that regulation, that's a way of incorporating the dark sky standard.
Yep, okay, great, thank you, that was it.
All right. All right. Audience, last chance.
Okay.
Well, maybe one.
Could you use the microphone, please?
I don't really know anything about dark sky, all right? I mean, I know there's a dark sky guy, but that's all I know. How will we all know, is it something that Ravi will do to check that it makes that?
One of the conditions is here that they need to submit, I believe he put in here that they submit a photometric plan. Okay, so somebody has to take, and what they do, they model it, they create this plan. Okay, and they take these fixtures and model them on the building at the height they're going to be, and it shows the light levels around the building, and then that can tell you theoretically if it complies or not. To check it out empirically, to go out and do it in the field, you'd have to go out with a light meter and actually measure the light, which can be done.
So what it means is originally their pole lights were really high and really bright. And so we brought it to the attention, and they made sure that they had the, shades, and that helped a lot. But if we hadn't brought it up, it maybe wouldn't have happened.
This is why we have to be alert as citizens to
Okay.
know what's going on around us.
So I guess what I could do, because I've been in communication with the dark sky guy, I can ask him when he comes back from Florida to look and see make sure that it is. And I don't know if you have any knowledge of what the lights are supposed to be as far as brightness goes, but he did make that comment in his email that they were supposed to be 100 watt or.
So
it's measured in lumens. It's the equivalent of
Yeah.
a 100-watt light bulb.
Yeah.
It's like 1,400 lumens or less.
Right.
Or something. Yep.
Right. So again,
And on this fixture, if you look at the cut sheet, it gives you the number of lumens that it puts out. And I believe it's underneath
1750, he wrote.
is the threshold, and he's put out 1401.
100 watt incandescent bulb, 1750 initial lumens
Right, and
or
these are-
less.
And
These are
1401.
Okay, okay.
So
that's good,
another
I'm
piece of
good.
information you have, so there's going to be a photometric plan, so you'll have access to that, and you could take that to whoever you wish to see if it's in
Okay.
compliance with what was
Yeah.
approved.
And there's also, somebody can physically go out and measure it.
Okay.
I
Like
know-
him?
I know
I could
Terry,
ask
yeah,
him, yeah.
chances, I'm sure he's got a light meter, and he'd probably
Yeah.
love to go out there and measure it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm sorry, we get a little heated about this.
My question is, do we have any recourse in terms of requesting a wall, a natural structure back there?
Not in the context of this proceeding.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
proceeding is about whether to
The lighting.
approve the replacement of the non-conforming lights.
And I
with
do get
conforming
that.
lights. That's the only thing that's before us.
And
I do get
But
that.
can you raise that issue with town officials? Sure.
Okay, that's just what I
But
wanted
is that
to,
something that we can address here tonight? No.
I do get that, but I just wanted to know if that,
There was the landscaping plan, which had the trees in it,
right,
so that's an avenue that you may or may not wish to pursue.
that would be the next step.
Okay, and then also you mentioned about runoff, that may or may not be something you wish to pursue also, because all these things require maintenance by the landowner.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, but there might be that recourse we could also,
Unfortunately, we don't have a big enforcement mechanism in this town. So, he's got plenty to do, and we just don't have the staff to go out and,
Proactive.
at 9 o'clock at night and start measuring
Okay.
light levels.
Okay.
Some towns do, some towns make you prove that the lights are compliant. Empirically, out in the field, you gotta measure it. We just don't have that in this
But you
town.
can get a copy of the landscaping plan that was approved, and you
Yep.
can look at the property and see whether it's complying with the plan or not.
okay, we will take that step. Thank you very much.
I just have one more thing.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it's getting out of control. But since she brought up the wall, when we first met with the board about Tractor Supply building back there, I asked for a fence. And they told me Shelburne doesn't do fences. And so I never questioned it. I never asked about it. Then they said they would put trees. But the trees don't you know, there's like 6 or 7 cedars, and it doesn't do, you know, it just doesn't do it. So that, if I was told that, and you guys remember, right? I feel like, how can I come back if that's part of the law or whatever it is in Shelburne?
I think the place to start is to look at the plan that was approved, because that
Okay.
was the town telling Tractor Supply what they had to do.
You can watch the tape of the meeting and read the minutes and read the decision and look at the plans that were approved. It's all a matter of record. Ravi could get you all that.
Yeah.
I was here then, but I
don't remember?
I don't remember saying Shelburne doesn't do fences, but
I mean, it should be quite simple. Here's what the paper says needs to be done. If you look at it and it doesn't conform to that, you tell him, and he can do his magic.
But it might not be on the plan.
Right.
If it's not on the plan.
Because I was asking for it, and they
But
said,
we're not talking fence, we're talking about landscaping and the
oh,
trees.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. So what was approved should all be documented.
okay.
And then it's a matter of seeing, is that how it actually is?
So I can get a copy of the original landscaping plan? Okay.
Mhm.
That's what I'll do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. One last time.
Took up so much time.
Anyone else? All right. I'd like to make a motion to finalize the record and close the hearing for application SUB 19-2. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right.
can we add the friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Be condition number 3, that the lights are installed within 45 days. And I'd also like to put a 4th one in there, that the photometric plan is submitted as soon as possible.
45 days of signing?
Within 45 days from the time you get your decision,
Okay.
which I think will be quick.
Yep. All right. All those in favor?
Hang on a second, wait a
Oh.
minute, I gotta, wait a minute.
Okay.
These were suggested conditions?
Yes.
So I need to,
And I think yours can just sit on top of that.
yeah, I'm gonna, just wanna read these real quick. A friendly amendment that all 3 of these conditions suggested by staff are included in the decision, as well as, I guess that would be number 6, stating that the lighting is installed within 45 days of the written decision's issuance.
That's item number 4.
Well,
Because
well,
these are repeats.
No, we're gonna add these.
Yeah, so that'd be item 4 for the 45 days.
So you have, I have it as 3. What are you working off of? I have.
In the staff report, there are 3 recommended conditions. In addition
So I
to,
have only 2. I have a placeholder for 3, so we must have a different staff.
It's under the staff recommendations.
staff recommendations on page 4.
It's not in the draft conditions, it's the draft staff recommendations. See 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, so that'd be,
Which is 45 days within issuance.
yeah, so essentially, there's 6
got it?
conditions
Got
altogether.
it. Photometric is already there.
And the
That's
photo.
number 1.
Yep.
Okay. Does everyone on the board understand that?
There's 4 conditions.
4 conditions. As staff recommended, 3 plus the new lighting installed 45 days after this approval. Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Approved.
Can I get a copy of that? Right, and all.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just send me a quick email.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. One's plenty.
All right.
One's enough.
Moving on. Application SUB 12-04R4, application by Sean Sweeney on behalf of Lolita Holdings LLC for preliminary plan review of a 2-lot re-subdivision in a mixed-use plan unit development property at 5059 and 5061 Shelburne Roads, located in the Village Center District, Village Core Overlay District, Village Design Review Overlay District, and the Stormwater Overlay District. Ravi, could you kick us off?
So this is a proposed two-lot subdivision in the mixed-use district, as mentioned. Currently, the lot is 0.644 acres. The proposed lots would end up being 0.477 acres and 0.149 acres. Right now, the structures are on the lot are as known as the Harrington House, which is a multifamily dwelling use with 3 apartment units, and the carriage barn, which is a business office use. With this proposal, the uses would be isolated with the business use on one lot and the multifamily dwelling use on the other lot. The sketch plan was reviewed and in early October, and the board authorized the applicant to file a preliminary plan in early October. The only concern that staff has noted has to do with the wastewater connections. The water and wastewater connection is that the proposed lot 1A, which is the carriage house, the wastewater line runs through the Harrington House structure and then out. So as long as both lots are owned by the same owner, this would not be an issue. However, if the lots one day down the road were to be owned by 2 different owners, this would be a potential issue for wastewater. So we have recommended a condition that states that should there be any changes in ownership to either proposed lots 1 or proposed lots 1A be suggested, direct water and sewer connections to proposed lots 1 and 1A must be established with the transfer of ownership.
How is that documented? Does it become an encumbrance on their deed?
That's one way of doing it, is specifying it on the deed. And that's probably the best way of doing it, I think. Yeah.
How would that ever be?
Yeah.
If it's noted on the plat?
Yeah, if it's.
You have to refile a plat, right?
Yeah, so we were thinking, when the final plan is signed and approved, that would be recorded with the plat, and the plat would have a reference to the decision in the land records. And that decision would specify this condition, but to reinforce it in the deed language too would also be helpful, I think.
Future buyer.
Yep. At this point, I'll defer to the applicant.
All right, ready? Oh, I swore you in already.
You swore me in already. I don't really have that much more to add to it other than I concur with what the findings were with the wastewater division, and I have no problem with that. So I can answer any questions.
Are you okay with it going on the deed? The condition?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
and then on the plat,
perfectly
we can both. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any public comment? Nope, didn't think so.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion then. Somewhere here, I'll bet you there's one.
There's one you'll have to add to it.
You don't have any light fixtures you're gonna put out on the building, do you?
I have all dark sky compliant light fixtures that I followed that were just like on the back.
And we appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So I would make a motion to finalize the record for application SUB 12-04R4.
Second.
All's in favor? Aye.
I would also make a motion to direct staff to prepare a decision that authorizes the applicant to prepare a final plan application for SUB 12-04R4 with the following conditions: that the pursuant to the town subdivision regulations, section 950, the current wastewater connection is acceptable as long as both parcels are under the same ownership. If proposed lot 1 and lot 1A are to be owned by 2 different entities, at any point in time, the direct sewer connection to proposed lot A must be established prior to any transfers of ownership.
And so noted on the deed.
And such language must be included on the deed and any final plat associated with SUB 1204R4.
Perfect.
Second.
All's in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Very good. You're approved.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Okay.
Something tells me that the next one's been continued, because there's nobody here. No? Really?
We have two people from the public.
Oh, you're here to represent that? Okay. I figured there'd be a whole room full of people.
Okay, application SUB 12-07R4 and CU 99-24R5 and SP 93-01R3. Application by Trudeau Consulting Engineers on behalf of Automaster for preliminary plan review, conditional use review to expand the existing use and commercial plan unit development. Property is located at 3328 Shelburne Road, is located in the mixed use district, stormwater overlay district, and floodplain and watercourse overlay district. All right, Ravi.
Okay, so this is an application to amend a previously approved commercial plan unit development. The applicant proposed increasing the vehicle storage area by 24,978 square feet. Thus, staff considers this an expansion of an existing conditional use and thus triggers conditional use review. With this proposal, 139 parking spaces would be added that would be devoted just for vehicle inventory, and in effect, 28 spaces calculated towards the use for the public would be removed. With this application, staff does note that the landscaping plan that the applicant has suggested in response to the sketch plan is appropriate. However, staff recommends that the board require a landscaping bond or security be provided prior to the issuance of any zoning permit as a condition of approval. DRB may ask further about whether the reduction of parking is appropriate and for the use. Otherwise, those are the comments that staff has noted and would defer to the applicant at this point.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah,
Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do. I do.
Both of you, awesome.
Yes.
Okay, could you introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Yeah, my name's Andrea Jotolo. I'm an engineer at Trudeau Consulting Engineers. We're representing the Automaster who's looking to just use this large green space that they currently have off the end of their existing parking in between the private drive that leads to a residence behind the lot. They would like to add, again, approximately 25,000 square feet of gravel, which is just over half an acre. We have revised the landscaping plan to meet the standards. We're not proposing any changing to lighting. And I did want to mainly just talk about stormwater because I think that was the board's main concern in the sketch plan review, and I believe probably the concern we have here tonight. So what's happening with the stormwater is the entire gravel parking area will flow to an existing stormwater pond that's just south of where that plan is showing.
Is it possible you have a view that shows before and after?
Yeah, these plans should include before and after it's the full set.
Yeah, so the grade-in area is the area that's proposed to be increased with gravel. Everything else that is white is the existing parking. So again, we're proposing to add 111 inventory parking spaces. There is a small amount of reduction to your standard parking space, and that is just because of the realignment of cars here. So currently there's parking this way. I believe this is all employee parking and overflow. So it just made more sense to orient the cars out like this. There will still be parking below it. And then in regards to the stormwater, everything that's proposed here will flow to an existing stormwater pond. That stormwater pond was originally designed to have a larger capacity than what was existing today, and it has been permitted that way. So in 2017, we amended the existing stormwater permit for a future build-out. They do plan to eventually put a new building here and pave it in. This is an interim project. So they did get a stormwater permit for that full build out of the new Honda building, which covers an increase in impervious on the site. What we're proposing now is below that total increase that was permitted. We did correspond with the state to ensure that we don't need any stormwater permit amendment for this interim project. The reason for that is that we're not changing the direction of where anything is flowing. We're not changing the manner of treatment or the manner of discharge. And the nutrient loading that comes from this gravel parking lot is still below what was previously existing on the site. So all of the state requirements are met on that.
Any questions from the board?
Did you have any comments on that presentation, Robbie?
Nope. Regarding stormwater, there is a reference to a valid state stormwater permit. It's permit 6938 INDS.A1, which is valid until November 5th, 2022.
Okay. Gail?
Gail Albert from the Natural Resources Committee. And we had been one of the CBCs that this project had to be heard before. And when they came to us, we did offer some comments that I haven't seen referred to here. But you should have them in your packet, and I can read them to you. We said that this would be acceptable as provided, but we strongly recommend that, given the increased frequency of 100-year storms and greater, that the location that's right next to the impaired Monroe Brook, we ask that the applicant should consider taking preemptive steps to improve the stormwater treatment on the site at this time, as opposed to waiting to some later date. We strongly recommend that, given the site's expired stormwater permits, and did I just hear that those are not expired? Because at the time that this was heard at our meeting, we understood that the stormwater permits that had been given had expired. If that's the case, then we ask that they be required to comply with regulations in effect at the time of any new or future applications for development on this site. We also ask that, given the extensive use of petroleum products, because this is a car parking lot, we strongly recommended that the adoption of mechanical filtration methods that could anticipate petroleum pollution be complied with on that site. And then finally, we ask that the applicant obtain updated permits to replace old permits that meet new standards and comply with the projected future regulations. And hopefully you do have that sheet in your packet. I think I see it there.
Gail, so the last comment, you mentioned comply with future regulations.
With any future, what we had asked is that they obtain updated permits to replace the old ones that meet new standards that may currently be in place since their last permit was issued.
Current standards, got it, okay, thank you. Okay.
So Robbie, my purely technical question is, and either of you can comment on it, is do they have any lapsed permits, or are all their operations as proposed currently permit?
In terms of state permitting, that I would defer to the applicant to be certain about any lapsed permits. The board could also add a condition requiring a project review sheet with any final plan application or a project review sheet upon continuance.
And I mean, I guess where I was coming from, just to be blunt, is that if they're subject to permits that are presently in effect and they're in compliance with the terms of those permits, it's a little unclear to me that we can condition approval on higher standards at this point.
I'm not aware of any lapsed permits for stormwater, but I can defer to the applicant regarding the permits for this property.
Yeah, so the stormwater permits that this property has are slightly complicated in that there are multiple permits. So there's the most recent permit that we got, which is the 6938 INDS.A1. That was permitted under the 2002 stormwater manual, so just before the 2017 manual came out. There are 2 additional permits that cover the site, which were issued prior to the 2002 rules, so very old permits when the site was initially developed. Because it's an impaired watershed, those permits are mixed in to the state's impaired stormwater MS4 program. So while these 2 old permits have technically expired, if you pull them up, they'll say expired, they are still present for the site because there is no current state program to renew those permits.
Is there a multi-sector, an MSGP for this site?
There's not an MSGP for the site.
What does that mean, Mark?
It's a multi-sector general operating permit that they have to comply with.
Okay.
I'm not sure what triggers a multi-sector permit.
Yeah, I don't believe that this site would trigger multi-sector. Usually it's more of an industrial use. Off the top of my head, it's usually gravel pits and processing facilities.
2 of the permits are expired, and
So-
the state has no mechanism to renew them.
Yeah,
Is that
I
what you
will say
said?
that this site and this proposed site is in full compliance with the state stormwater regulations. Part of that is that there's 2 old permits that are valid, but technically expired.
So why do you say they're valid if they're expired? That's a contradiction.
It is a contradiction, because the state is working on all of their plans for the impaired watersheds. When those plans go into action, the permits will require a renewal, and they'll be updated at that point. There's just no plan in place right now to do that.
So if you didn't have any permits at all, what would you do?
If I didn't have any permits.
If you didn't have any existing permits that expired and you had to apply for new permits, I'm being very simplistic.
This permit thing is a little wonky. I agree. There are properties in this area that are under the similar category of expired but also valid. So across the street with Al Martin Volvo, they have a similar type of expired but valid permit as well. There's a lot of them. Yep.
And the reason they're expired is the successor permitting regimes haven't been adopted yet.
It's something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just,
slow.
so it's there until there's a new program in place, that's the
Yep.
understanding?
Yep.
Okay, that makes
Yeah, and I
sense.
will note that there's not only that that will come into place, but there's also this 3-acre impervious rule, which the automaster will qualify. I don't know if you're all familiar with it, but at this point, very, very soon, any existing site that has over 3 acres of impervious is no longer grandfathered and will be required to get a stormwater permit for any portion of their impervious that's not physically treated to the 2002 standards. So there will be future stormwater permitting requirements for this site through the state. At this time, we are in compliance, and this proposed project is as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Understanding that the conditions right now are wonky, we're also aware of what the current stormwater conditions are. Not the legal conditions, but the actual conditions. And this property being on Monroe Brook, which is already in MS4, just seemed to the Natural Resources Committee to recommend that higher than normal standards be applied. And I'm not sure if that's an option for the board, but it's certainly one that we would ask that you consider.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, I completely understand Gail's concern. I would love to treat all impervious out there to the highest degree that we could. Unfortunately, I don't think that there is any regulation in place for further stormwater treatment.
For us to just drive it to a higher standard, what standard do we drive it to?
Exactly.
So this is a case where I just don't feel like I understand or am equipped enough to make a ruling on this. It's almost like need a consultant to come in, an independent consultant to tell, to give me some guidance on how I should be viewing permitting. I mean, the applicant says one thing, which I understand, they're going by the letter of the law, which is what you do. Natural Resources says another thing, which I understand also, and living in the town, I respect that. And so I don't know how, this being so complicated, I just don't know how to vote or how to think about it.
Can I add?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
My first would just be that this project has been reviewed by Dave Wheeler, who's the stormwater reviewer for the town of Shelburne, and I have email correspondence with him back and forth. It's also, I have email right off from the state that no further permitting is required.
Well, so let me say that slightly differently. So there will be additional permitting required, but only after the state has adopted the new standards.
Yes.
And obviously, when those new standards are adopted, this property will be required to comply with them.
Yes.
Especially when the 3 acre, when's the 3 acre thing kick in again?
The 3 acre rule, I'm not positive. It's going to kick in this year.
It is this year? Okay.
And all areas in the Lake Champlain Basin will be required to comply by 2025.
Okay, so there's no such thing as grandfather clauses to an older standard. Everyone has, you'll have to abide by it. Okay, that makes me feel better.
But if our position is we want to do something more, but we don't know what to do because we don't know what the new standards the state adopted will be.
Yeah.
That means that we can't approve this or any other of the expired but valid permit properties doing anything with their properties, which I think is unnecessarily restrictive. I guess I would feel more concerned about going forward with this, but for the fact that since the permits are expired, when the state adopts new standards, the properties will be required to comply with them, right. even if we can't anticipate what those standards are.
Right.
So I don't think us approving it ironically means that they can sit on their hands and not do anything. Once the new standards are adopted, they've got to do the same thing that every other expired but valid permit holder has to do.
As required with all of our permits, the applicant is required to comply with all state requirements. It's in the fine print of all of our permits. Even though we operate on 2 tracks, like town is 1 track and state is another, and operate very separately. We have those fine print, and we have the language that says that the applicant is required to comply with all state requirements associated with any land development.
And then when that happens, the SNRCC will have, do you guys go in front of the state when the hearings come up for these state permits in town?
We have never been called.
Okay. Well, I mean, you
certainly would be a stakeholder.
Certainly you're a stakeholder, and that would probably be your best avenue to pursue that, really. The state's got a pretty bigger hammer than we do, so. And all those permits are subject to public comment and periods.
I noticed in here there's a write-up on handicap parking and bicycle parking. What do we need to know about that?
So it's on page 8. Yep. Something that staff has noted that with a decrease in parking, would that impact handicap parking requirements, and with the decrease in parking for the use, would that impact bicycle parking?
So when you're saying decrease in parking, you're referring to the decrease in the public parking spaces?
Yes.
Because net, if you look at the 2 public and storage, actually the number of total spaces is going down slightly, right?
Yes, something like that, yes.
What's the applicant's plans to address? Are they going to keep steady with the number of handicap spots?
Yeah, so there's no change to the handicap or bicycle parking. Both of those are located outside the front of the building. This is all in the back within existing gravel areas.
This is Basically inventory parking.
Yep.
Okay. So there's really no change in head count proposed at this point for
There is, so,
employee.
Are reallocating to inventory from public?
it's a little bit complicated because there are a mix of spaces that meet the dimensional requirements of the town's parking, as well as a mix of inventory spaces where you'll park a car right up next to another car. So there is a reduction of 28 spaces of those regulatory parking spaces and an increase of 111 inventory spaces. So it's not really a direct comparison.
So is the property still in compliance when you reduce the patron parking? My read was yes.
Yep.
Your testimony is yes, it's still in compliance.
The DRB determines whether the parking is adequate based off of trips and the type of use.
Right. So, and then I suspect bicycle parking and parking in general would be readdressed when they come back for the new Honda facility. Okay. There's no change, no proposed change in head count. They're not adding any building space or anything like that from the previous one. Okay.
All right, any other comments from the board? Questions, thoughts? We feeling comfortable enough to finalize the record and close the hearing? Make a motion, we do such. Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, there's that piece of it. We feeling good enough to indicate authorization as written?
Subject to the written conditions.
Yeah. Feeling good?
Yep, I'm good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Done. Well,
Thank you.
all right. I think that was the last agenda item.
You guys have a deliberative session that you need to have for the stuff that Jeff and I were recused from?
Yeah, do you need to talk about that?
Because if so, Jeff and I need to scram.
Yeah, is there any other deliberations we need to, well, first of all, all right, we do. All right, so any other items before we?
We continued one of the hearings and the other one was pretty straightforward, so.
All right. So I make a motion to close tonight's hearing. A second? All those in favor? Aye.